The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as hundreds of tourists gathered for the daily changing of the guard ceremony. The ancient stone walls seemed to glow in the golden light, creating an atmosphere of grandeur and tradition that had remained unchanged for centuries. Among the crowd of visitors from around the world stood a small family from a distant village, their faces filled with wonder and anticipation. James Miller held his 7-year-old son Tommy's hand tightly. As they navigated through the sea of people, cameras, and excited chatter, the father's weathered hands showed years of hard work on the family farm, but today he wore his Sunday best, wanting to make this special trip memorable for his son. Tommy bounced on his toes, trying to see over the adults in front of him, his small frame making it difficult to catch glimpses of the ceremony area. Tommy had been talking about this moment for weeks. Ever since James had promised to bring him to see the famous royal guards, the boy had saved his allowance money to buy a small souvenir, and he wore his cleanest shirt with a tiny pin of the national flag that his mother had carefully attached that morning. In his pocket, he carried a small toy soldier his grandfather had given him before passing away the previous winter. The painted figure meant everything to Tommy, representing his dreams of bravery and honor. The boy's eyes sparkled with pure excitement as he caught his first glimpse of the tall guards in their magnificent red uniforms and towering black bearskin hats. He had seen pictures in books and on television, but nothing had prepared him for the real sight. These men seemed larger than life, like heroes from the stories his grandfather used to tell him, about brave soldiers who protected their country with unwavering dedication. The royal guards stood, like living statues, positioned around the courtyard, their faces serious and focused beneath the shadow of their ceremonial headwear. Each man had undergone years of rigorous training to earn the right to stand in this honored position. They had learned to maintain perfect discipline, never breaking character no matter what distractions surrounded them. Their commitment to duty was absolute, tested daily by curious tourists who often tried various methods to make them smile, laugh, or show any human reaction. These attempts usually failed, as the guards remained perfectly still, their eyes fixed straight ahead, their bodies rigid with military precision. They were living symbols of tradition, representing centuries of royal service and unwavering loyalty. Their silence spoke volumes about their dedication to something greater than themselves. As the ceremony began with the sound of approaching drums and marching feet, Tommy pressed himself closer to the metal barriers that separated the crowd from the ceremony area. His small hands gripped the cool metal as he stood on his tiptoes, not wanting to miss a single moment of what he considered the most important event of his young life. He had never seen anything so grand and official, so steeped in history and tradition. The precision of the guards' movements amazed him beyond words. Each step was exactly measured, each turn executed with mathematical perfection. Their boots struck the ancient cobblestones in perfect unison, creating a rhythm that seemed to echo through time itself. The young boy watched in absolute wonder, his mouth slightly open in amazement, completely absorbed in the spectacle before him. James smiled as he watched his son's reaction, remembering his own childhood fascination with soldiers and ceremonies. He placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder, sharing in the boy's excitement while keeping him safe in the crowd. Other families around them seemed equally captivated, with children pointing and whispering in awe at the magnificent display of military precision. The atmosphere in the courtyard was electric with anticipation and respect. As tourists from every corner of the world documented this iconic moment, some visitors had traveled thousands of miles just to witness this daily ceremony that had become one of the most famous military traditions in the world. Tommy clutched his toy soldier tighter, feeling a deep connection to the real soldiers before him. In his innocent mind, he imagined himself one day standing as proudly as these guards, protecting important places and people. The ceremony represented everything noble and heroic that his young heart admired. Neither Tommy nor anyone else in the crowd could have imagined that within the next few minutes, something extraordinary was about to unfold. This routine ceremony, performed thousands of times before, was about to become something entirely different. A moment of pure human connection was approaching that would break through centuries of rigid protocol and touch the hearts of everyone present. The stage was set for an encounter that would remind everyone watching that beneath the uniforms, the training, and the ceremony, these guards were human beings capable of recognizing and responding to genuine respect and innocence. Tommy stood there in his simple clothes with his toy soldier, completely unaware that he was about to become part of a story that would be remembered and shared for years to come. As the ceremony continued with its time-honored rituals, Tommy's attention became focused on one particular guard who seemed somehow different from the others. This guard, a 28-year-old man named Michael Harrison, stood with the same military bearing as his colleagues, but there was something in his eyes that set him apart. Despite his training to remain impassive, those who looked closely could detect a subtle warmth that occasionally flickered when his gaze swept over the crowd. Michael had been serving as a royal guard for 5 years, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him. The Harrison family had a long tradition of military service. Michael had grown up hearing stories of honor, duty, and sacrifice. But today felt different somehow, charged with an energy he couldn't quite identify. Perhaps it was the unusually beautiful weather or the particularly enthusiastic crowd, but something stirred within him as he maintained his post. The guard had noticed the small boy early in the ceremony, mainly because Tommy's genuine excitement stood out from the usual tourist behavior. While most visitors were busy taking selfies or trying to provoke reactions from the guards, this child seemed genuinely captivated by the ceremony itself. His wide eyes followed every movement with the kind of pure fascination that adults rarely possessed. Tommy, completely unaware that he had captured a guard's attention, raised his small hand in a shy wave toward the line of soldiers. The gesture was spontaneous and innocent, the kind of friendly greeting any child might offer to people they admired. Most adults in the crowd chuckled knowingly at the boy's action, understanding that the guards were trained never to respond to such interactions. The rules governing royal guard behavior were strict and uncompromising. No interaction with the public during duty was permitted under any circumstances. These regulations had been established over centuries to maintain the dignity and mystique of the position. Breaking this rule could result in serious disciplinary action, including potential dismissal from the prestigious role. Every guard knew these consequences intimately, as they were drilled into them from their first day of training. But Michael saw Tommy's innocent gesture with different eyes than those of a typical observer. Something deep in his heart responded to the child's pure and respectful approach. Unlike the tourists who sometimes behaved disrespectfully in attempts to get reactions, this boy was showing genuine admiration and respect. His wave wasn't meant to be disruptive or attention-seeking. It was simply a child's natural way of acknowledging people he looked up to. The internal conflict that began building in Michael's mind was intense. His training screamed at him to maintain discipline and ignore all civilian interactions. Instinct developed through years of service told him to keep his eyes forward and his expression neutral. Yet something more fundamental, more human, was awakening within him as he watched. Tommy's continued fascination with the ceremony. The crowd around the barriers had grown significantly larger as the ceremony progressed, with more tourists arriving and pushing forward for better views. Camera phones emerged from pockets and bags as people prepared to capture the traditional moments they had come to witness. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders, creating a sea of excited faces above. The adult crowd? The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and respect. But no one expected anything beyond the usual formal proceedings. Michael found himself fighting an internal battle between duty and something deeper. His military training emphasized the importance of following orders without question, maintaining discipline regardless of personal feelings, and never allowing emotions to interfere with professional responsibilities. These principles had been drilled into him through countless hours of instruction and practice until they became second nature. However, watching Tommy's pure enthusiasm began to remind Michael of why he had originally chosen this path of service. Before the routine had settled in, before the daily repetition had made the ceremony feel mechanical, He had joined the royal guard because he wanted to be part of something meaningful and noble. He had dreamed of representing the highest ideals of service and protection, being worthy of the respect and admiration that people like young Tommy showed toward his position. The ceremony continued around him with its familiar rhythm. Michael felt increasingly disconnected from the mechanical precision of the movements. His fellow guards maintained their perfect formation and timing, completely focused on their duties as they had been trained to do. The sounds of marching feet, shouted commands, and military music filled the courtyard with traditional authority. Yet, through all the formal pageantry, Michael kept finding his attention drawn back to the small boy at the barrier. Tommy continued to watch with unwavering attention. His toy soldier clutched in one hand as he absorbed every detail of the proceedings. The child's respect and wonder were so genuine that they seemed to cut through all the ceremony and protocol, reaching something authentic and human that Michael had almost forgotten existed within his professional role. The moment was approaching, when Michael would have to make a choice that could define not only this particular ceremony, but potentially his entire career and understanding of what it meant to serve with honor. Tommy continued to watch the guards with the kind of pure fascination that only a child could maintain, his attention never wavering despite the length of the ceremony. He whispered excited observations to his father about how brave and strong the soldiers looked, how perfectly they moved together, and how their uniforms sparkled in the sunlight. His innocent comments drew smiles from nearby tourists who were charmed by the boy's genuine enthusiasm and respectful behavior. James smiled warmly at his son's wonder, the pride evident in his eyes as he watched Tommy's reaction to this grand display of military tradition. The father found himself remembering his own childhood dreams of being a soldier, wearing a uniform and serving his country with honor. Those dreams had been set aside for the practical needs of family farming. But seeing his son's excitement brought back those old aspirations and the noble feelings that had once inspired them. The ceremony had reached its crescendo, with the guards performing their most complex, synchronized movements. Every step was precisely measured, every turn executed with the mathematical perfection that came from countless hours of practice. The participating soldiers moved as one entity, their individual personalities subsumed into the collective display of military excellence. The crowd watched in respectful silence, many visitors experiencing a deep appreciation for the skill and dedication required to achieve such flawless coordination. The traditional music played by the military band added gravitas to the proceedings, each note carefully timed to accompany specific movements in the ceremony. The sound echoed off the ancient palace walls, creating an atmosphere that connected the present moment to centuries of similar ceremonies performed in the same location. History seemed to live and breathe in the very air around the courtyard. It was during this moment of peak formality and tradition that Tommy suddenly did something completely unexpected. Inspired by a surge of genuine respect and admiration that overwhelmed his young heart, he stood as straight as his 7-year-old frame would allow. With the solemnity of someone far beyond his years, he placed his small right hand over his heart in the way he had seen in movies and books about brave soldiers. Then, with careful deliberation and the utmost seriousness, Tommy raised his hand to his forehead in the most respectful military salute his small body could manage. It wasn't the perfect form of a trained soldier. His elbow was a bit too high, his fingers not quite aligned correctly, and his posture still showed his youth. But what the salute lacked in technical precision, it more than made up for in pure, heartfelt respect and admiration. The gesture was so unexpected and so genuinely moving that it immediately caught the attention of several people in the surrounding crowd. A woman standing nearby placed her hand over her heart, touched by the child's sincere display of respect. Some parents discreetly pointed out Tommy's salute to their own children, hoping to inspire similar appreciation for the ceremony and the service it represented. An elderly veteran in the crowd felt tears welling up in his eyes as he recognized the pure respect in the boy's gesture. He had served in the military decades earlier and understood the deep meaning behind a proper salute. To see such genuine appreciation from someone so young reminded him of why he had been proud to serve his country. Michael saw Tommy's salute with perfect clarity and the impact hit him like a physical force. In that single, pure gesture, he saw everything noble and meaningful about military service reflected back to him through the eyes of an innocent child. The boy wasn't performing for attention or trying to be clever. He was offering the highest form of respect he knew how to give, recognizing something worthy of honor in Michael's position and service. All of Michael's extensive training, all the rules and regulations that governed his behavior, all the expectations and protocols that defined his role suddenly seemed less important than acknowledging this child's beautiful and heartfelt gesture of respect. The salute represented everything that military service was supposed to embody: protection of the innocent, service to something greater than oneself, and the maintenance of values worth honoring. The moment stretched out as Michael felt the weight of decision pressing upon him. His fellow guards continued their prescribed movements around him, maintaining the ceremonial formation with unwavering discipline. The crowd continued to watch and photograph, most still unaware of the small drama unfolding between one guard and one small boy. But for Michael, everything else seemed to fade into the background. He found himself at a crossroads between the rigid adherence to rules that his position demanded and the recognition of a human moment that transcended all protocol. The boy's salute deserved acknowledgement, deserved respect in return, deserved recognition that his gesture had been seen and appreciated by someone worthy of giving such recognition. The decision forming in Michael's mind was dangerous to his career, potentially devastating to his future in the Royal Guard. Yet as he looked at Tommy's earnest young face, still holding that imperfect but perfect salute, Michael felt that some things were more important than personal consequences. Some moments demanded courage of a different kind than that shown on battlefields: the courage to choose humanity over regulation, connection over isolation, and recognition over indifference. The ceremony continued its ancient rhythm around them, but something fundamental was about to change in the space between one guard and one small boy who believed in the nobility of service. The decision that formed in Michael's mind came with the clarity of absolute certainty, despite the enormous risk it represented to everything he had worked for in his military career. In that crystalline moment of choice, he decided that some things transcended rules and regulations, that recognizing genuine respect and innocence was more important than maintaining the rigid protocols that normally governed his every action. Slowly and deliberately, while maintaining his ceremonial position and perfect military bearing, Michael raised his right hand to his forehead. With the crisp, precise form that came from years of rigorous training, he returned Tommy's salute with all the respect and acknowledgement that the boy's gesture deserved. It was a perfect military salute, executed with the skill and dignity of a professional soldier, offered as a bridge between his world of duty and the child's world of wonder. The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps of surprise and amazement rippled through the hundreds of assembled tourists as they realized they were witnessing something completely unprecedented. Royal Guards simply did not break protocol, especially not during an official ceremony. The strict discipline and unwavering adherence to rules was part of what made them legendary. Part of what drew visitors from around the world to witness their dedication. Camera phones that had been casually documenting the routine ceremony suddenly focused with urgent intensity on the exchange between the guard and the boy. The rapid clicking of camera shutters filled the air as people rushed to capture this extraordinary moment. Social media notifications began pinging as witnesses immediately began sharing what they were seeing, knowing that their friends and family would never believe such a thing had happened without photographic proof. Whispers and excited murmurs spread through the gathering like wildfire as people tried to process and share what they had just witnessed. "Did you see that?" became the most common phrase heard in a dozen different languages as international tourists struggled to comprehend the significance of what had just occurred. Many visitors had seen the changing of the guard ceremony multiple times, but none had ever witnessed anything like this unprecedented break from tradition. Tommy's reaction was pure
joy mixed with complete amazement.
His young face lit up with a radiance that seemed to outshine the morning sun as he realized that the impressive soldier had not only seen his salute, but had considered it worthy of a response. The guard, this important, magnificent person in the beautiful uniform, had acknowledged him. His small chest swelled with pride as he tried to maintain his own salute for as long as the professional soldier did. Wanting to show that he understood the importance and solemnity of the moment, they were sharing. For Tommy, this was the greatest honor imaginable. In his 7-year-old understanding of the world, he had just been recognized as worthy of respect by one of the bravest and most important people he could imagine. The toy soldier in his pocket seemed to pulse with new meaning, connecting him to this real soldier who had shown him such incredible kindness and recognition. James felt overwhelming emotion welling up in his chest as he watched his son's reaction to this unexpected honor. Tears gathered in his eyes as he witnessed the pure joy and pride radiating from Tommy's small face. This simple exchange between a soldier and his child represented something beautiful and profound about human connection, mutual respect, and the recognition of innocence and sincerity across the barriers of age, position, and protocol. The father understood instinctively that they were witnessing something that would become a treasured memory for the rest of Tommy's life. This moment would be the story the boy would tell his own children and grandchildren. The experience that might shape his understanding of honor, respect, and the importance of acknowledging goodness wherever it appears. Other guards in the formation had noticed Michael's breach of protocol, their peripheral vision catching the movement despite their forward-facing positions. They knew the regulations as well as he did, understanding perfectly the professional risk he had just taken. Some felt a mixture of concern for their colleagues' potential consequences and admiration for the courage it had taken to make such a choice. They had all felt similar moments of human connection during their service, but none had been brave enough to act on those feelings when duty demanded otherwise. The crowd had fallen into a respectful, almost reverent silence as the full significance of the moment settled over the courtyard. This was no longer just a tourist attraction or a routine military ceremony. They were witnessing something real and meaningful, something that transcended the usual boundaries between performer and audience, between duty and humanity, between tradition and compassion. Many people in the crowd found themselves fighting back tears as they recognized the beauty of what they had just seen. The exchange represented hope that rigidity could yield to kindness, that rules could bend for genuine goodness, that even in the most formal and regulated environments, human connection could still find a way to flourish. The salute lasted only a few seconds in real time, but for everyone present, it felt like a moment suspended outside the normal flow of events, a perfect crystallization of respect, recognition, and the power of innocent appreciation to move even the most disciplined heart. When Michael finally lowered his hand and returned to his regulation stoic position, the entire courtyard remained suspended in a moment of profound silence. The hundreds of assembled tourists seemed to collectively hold their breath as if afraid that speaking might somehow diminish the power of what they had just witnessed. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds, filled with the weight of recognition that everyone present had just experienced something truly extraordinary. Then, like a dam-breaking, spontaneous applause erupted. From every corner of the crowd, began with a few people clapping softly, but quickly grew into sustained, heartfelt appreciation that echoed off the ancient palace walls. This wasn't the polite, obligatory applause that sometimes followed the formal ceremony. This was genuine, emotional recognition of a moment that had touched something deep in the human spirit. People throughout the crowd found themselves wiping away tears as the full emotional impact of the exchange settled over them. Hardened business travelers who had stopped to watch out of casual curiosity found themselves unexpectedly moved by the pure interaction between the soldier and the child. Parents held their own children a little tighter, hoping to someday witness such genuine respect and recognition in their young ones. An elderly woman near the front of the crowd dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, murmuring to her companion about how beautiful it was to see such kindness in a world that often seemed too harsh and impersonal. A group of teenagers who had initially seemed more interested in their phones than the ceremony put their devices away and applauded with genuine enthusiasm. Momentarily freed from their usual cynicism by the simple power of the moment they had witnessed, Tommy continued to beam with happiness that seemed to radiate from his entire small body. He could hardly believe what had happened to him. This incredible soldier, this important person in the magnificent uniform, had actually acknowledged his salute. He tugged excitedly on his father's sleeve, his young mind struggling to find words adequate to express the magnitude of what he felt. The experience was overwhelming his 7-year-old capacity to process emotions, leaving him filled with joy, pride, and a sense of validation that would stay with him for the rest of his life. James nodded in understanding, his own emotion evident, as he squeezed his son's shoulder reassuringly. The father's eyes met Michael's briefly across the ceremonial space, and in that instant, a wordless communication passed between them. Gratitude. From the parent to the soldier who had given his child such an incredible gift, and perhaps a subtle acknowledgement from the guard that the risk had been worthwhile. The age of social media meant that videos of the extraordinary moment began spreading across the internet within minutes of its occurrence. People who had captured the exchange on their phones immediately began uploading the footage to various platforms, adding captions that struggled to convey the emotional impact of what they had witnessed. Comments like "faith in humanity restored," "this is what real service looks like," and "the power of innocent respect" began appearing as the clips spread across networks around the world. The story began touching viewers internationally who were moved by the pure interaction between the child and the soldier. People shared the videos with friends and family, added their own emotional reactions, and discussed the significance of the moment in terms that ranged from simple appreciation to deeper philosophical observations about duty, humanity, and the importance of recognizing goodness wherever it appears. News outlets picked up the story within hours, with reporters scrambling to get additional information about the guard and the boy involved. The video clips became viral sensations, viewed millions of times by people who found in the simple exchange a reminder of what was good and noble about human nature. Michael continued, performing his ceremonial duties for the remainder of the changing of the guard, but inside he felt a warmth and satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years of service. The routine movements and formations that had become almost mechanical through repetition suddenly felt infused with new meaning and purpose. He had remembered, in the most profound way possible, why service meant more than just following orders. It was about connecting with and protecting the people who looked up to those in positions of responsibility and trust. The risk he had taken by breaking protocol seemed insignificant compared to the joy he had been able to bring to one innocent child and the inspiration he had apparently provided to hundreds of witnesses. He had acted from his heart rather than his training manual, and the result had been something beautiful that would be remembered long after countless routine ceremonies had been forgotten. As the formal ceremony drew toward its conclusion, Tommy prepared to leave with his father, but he couldn't resist waving goodbye to all the guards. He saved his biggest, most enthusiastic wave for Michael, hoping the soldier would somehow understand how grateful he was for the incredible honor he had received. Michael, maintaining his professional composure, but allowing just the slightest relaxation in his expression, gave Tommy an almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It was barely noticeable to casual observers, but for Tommy, it was another precious gift, a final confirmation that their shared moment had been real and meaningful to both of them. The boy would carry this memory with him forever, a perfect example of how respect and kindness could bridge any gap between people, no matter how different their circumstances might be. In the months that followed, Michael found that his perspective on his duties had fundamentally changed. Where he had once seen rigid routine, he now saw opportunities to embody the values that had inspired him to join the Guard in the first place. He approached each ceremony with renewed dedication, understanding that every tourist watching might include another child like Tommy, who was looking for heroes and examples of noble service. The story continued to resonate in unexpected ways throughout the military community. Other guards began sharing their own stories of moments when they had felt the tension between strict protocol and human connection. Training programs started incorporating discussions about the balance between discipline and appropriate recognition. Of public respect and appreciation, Michael received hundreds of letters from people around the world who had been touched by the video of his exchange with Tommy. Parents wrote to thank him for providing their children with an example of how respect should be acknowledged. Veterans shared their own stories of meaningful connections with civilians who had shown them appreciation. Children sent drawings of soldiers and thank you, notes that reminded him daily of the impact that simple recognition could have. One letter particularly moved him. It came from Tommy himself. Written in the careful penmanship of a 7-year-old but filled with genuine gratitude and continued admiration. The boy had drawn a picture of the two of them, saluting each other, with both figures smiling despite the formal military gesture. At the bottom, in his best handwriting, Tommy had written, "Thank you for seeing me and for showing me what honor." Looks like the impact of their encounter extended beyond both of their individual lives to influence the broader conversation about the role of military ceremony in modern society. The incident sparked discussions about whether traditional protocols needed to evolve to allow for more human connection, while still maintaining the dignity and discipline that made these ceremonies meaningful. Some military historians and ceremonial experts argued that Michael's action represented a perfect example of how traditions could be honored, while still allowing room for the human elements that gave those traditions their deeper meaning. They pointed out that the most memorable and meaningful military ceremonies throughout history had often been those that combined strict discipline with moments of genuine human connection. The palace administration, initially concerned about potential disruptions to future ceremonies, eventually recognized that the positive attention generated by the incident had actually enhanced public appreciation for the guards and their service. They developed new guidelines that allowed for limited acknowledgement of respectful public gestures, while maintaining the essential dignity and discipline of the ceremonies. Tommy's family was invited to return to the palace several months later for a private ceremony where he was formally thanked for his demonstration of respect and his role in reminding everyone of the importance of recognizing good service. During this visit, he had the opportunity to meet Michael again, this time in a setting where conversation was permitted. The reunion was emotional for both of them. Tommy, now a few months older, but still possessing the same genuine enthusiasm, thanked Michael repeatedly for making him feel so honored and important. Michael, in turn, thanked Tommy for reminding him of the true meaning behind his service, and for having the courage to show respect so openly and honestly. Their conversation, was witnessed by Tommy's parents and several military officials, reinforced the lessons that both had learned from their original encounter. Tommy spoke about how the experience had taught him to always show appreciation for people who served others, while Michael explained how the boy's respect had reminded him that military service was ultimately about protecting and honoring the innocent trust and admiration of people like Tommy. The story of their encounter became part of the official history of the Royal Guard, included in training materials as an example of how proper service could transcend strict protocol when guided by genuine respect and appropriate judgment. New guards learned about the incident not as an excuse to break rules, but as an illustration of the deeper purposes that rules were meant to serve. Years later, as Tommy grew older, he would often reflect on that transformative moment at the palace. The experience had planted seeds that would influence his entire approach to life, teaching him about the importance of showing respect, the value of service to others, and the power of simple human connection to bridge any gap between people. Michael continued his service with the Royal Guard, eventually rising to positions of greater responsibility, where he could help train new guards and share the lessons he had learned about balancing discipline with humanity. He never forgot the lesson that Tommy had taught him, that the highest form of military service involved not just following orders, but also recognizing and responding appropriately to the genuine respect and appreciation of the people they served. The simple salute between a soldier and a child had become something much larger, a reminder that in a world often divided by differences, the basic human values of respect, recognition, and connection could still create moments of perfect understanding and mutual appreciation that transcended all barriers. Days and weeks that followed the extraordinary moment at the palace, the story of Michael and Tommy's exchange continued to spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The video clips shared by witnesses had been viewed millions of times across various social media platforms, with people from every continent adding their own emotional responses and personal reflections on what the moment meant to them. News organizations around the world picked up the story, featuring it in broadcasts and articles that explored themes of duty versus humanity, the power of innocent respect, and the importance of recognizing genuine goodness wherever it appears. The simple exchange between a 7-year-old boy and a professional soldier had somehow captured the imagination of people everywhere, becoming a symbol of hope in a world that often seemed dominated by conflict and division. Tommy became something of a local celebrity in his small village, the neighbors and friends eager to hear his first-hand account of what had happened at the palace. But the boy handled his unexpected fame with the same genuine humility he had shown during the original encounter. He would carefully retell the story, emphasizing not his own role, but how brave and kind the soldier had been, how important it was to show respect to people who served others, and how proud he felt to have been acknowledged by someone so worthy of admiration. The experience had a profound impact on Tommy's understanding of respect, service, and the importance of recognizing goodness in others. He began paying more attention. 2 people in his community who served in various capacities: teachers, police officers, firefighters, and even the postal worker who delivered mail to their rural area. His parents noticed that he had developed a habit of thanking people for their service and showing appreciation for work that others might take for granted at school. Tommy's teacher used his story as the basis for lessons about respect, courage, and the importance of acknowledging good behavior in others. The boy's classmates were inspired by his experience and began looking for their own opportunities to show appreciation to people who serve their community. What had started as one spontaneous gesture of respect had begun rippling outward, inspiring others to recognize and acknowledge goodness wherever they encountered it. Michael, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his decision to break protocol with remarkable grace and dignity. As expected, he was called before his commanding officers to explain his actions and face potential disciplinary measures. The military hierarchy took protocol violations seriously, and there were regulations that clearly prohibited the kind of interaction he had engaged in during an official ceremony. However, the widespread positive reaction to his gesture, combined with his otherwise exemplary service record, worked in his favor during the disciplinary proceedings. His commanding officers found themselves in the unusual position of having to balance strict adherence to military protocol with recognition of an action that had brought positive attention to their unit and the institution they served. The final decision was a compromise that reflected both the need to maintain discipline and the acknowledgement that Michael's action had been motivated by the highest ideals of service. He received a formal reprimand for breaking protocol, but he also received an unofficial commendation for demonstrating the kind of humanity and connection with the public that represented the best aspects of military service. More importantly, for Michael personally, the experience had restored his sense of purpose and connection to the deeper meaning of his role. The routine aspects of ceremonial duty that had begun to feel mechanical and empty were suddenly infused with new significance. He understood more clearly than ever that his position was not just about following orders and maintaining discipline, but about representing something worthy of the respect and admiration that people like. Tommy naturally offered to those who served,